In the quietude of a library, two strangers crossed paths among ancient pages and shared silences. A discreet gesture, a lingering gaze, and something neither of them expected is born. A silent bond, made of jasmine tea, scribbled books, and words spoken with care. What begins as casual encounters transforms into a love story that blossoms slowly, with deep roots, until a hidden truth threatens everything. But what if the truest love is the one that chooses to stay, even when everything seems lost? Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. In the municipal library at that time of the afternoon, the silence was practically absolute. Dean adjusted his glasses, immersed in a poetry book he had found lost among more imposing volumes. He had this habit, looking for forgotten treasures on the less visited shelves. That's when he noticed the woman at the diagonal table to his. She wasn't flipping through the book as people usually do. Her fingers glided over the pages with an almost reverential delicacy, as if the paper were made of something precious and fragile. She had brown hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and every now and then she would brush it aside with a distracted gesture, completely absorbed in what she was reading. Dean realized he had been watching her for too long when she suddenly looked up and caught him. There was no embarrassment, just a silent recognition. She smiled briefly, a smile that seemed to hold some secret, and returned to her reading. At that moment, Dean knew he needed to meet her. He approached her the next day when he saw her again in the same place. He stumbled over his words as he asked about the book she was reading, a novel about a journey through the interior of a cold country. She responded with a soft and melodious voice, introducing herself as Summer. Her eyes, Dean noticed, were of an indefinable shade between green and amber, and they conveyed much more than her cautious words. "Do you always read here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "It's the quietest place I know," she replied. "And you?" "I come whenever I can escape the office," he confessed, showing his project analyst badge. "I work over there in the business center." In the following days, they met by chance at the library. Summer was reserved, but Dean noticed that she began to wait for him. He observed how she saved the spot in front of her, how her eyes lit up when she saw him enter. He, methodical in everything in life, studied every detail of her, how she frowned when reading something intriguing, how she always carried a small notebook where she jotted down phrases, how she preferred jasmine tea on cold days. Dean was never one for grand gestures. He believed that love was in the small attentions. He started leaving a cup of tea on her table before she arrived. He learned that Summer detested crowds and preferred to walk through less crowded streets. He discovered that she worked as a freelance translator, had grown up in a small town in the countryside, and had a scar on her left wrist from when she fell off her bike at the age of 9. Each piece of information was kept as a treasure. Each conversation brought them a little closer. In the 3rd month, when Summer cancelled their meeting at the library due to a heavy rain, Dean surprised her by showing up at her apartment with a bag of bread from the French bakery on the other side of the city, her favourites, which she had mentioned only once, casually. "How did you remember that?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "I listen," he replied simply. "Truly." It was the first time Summer let him see beyond the surface. She invited him in, served coffee in mismatched cups, and talked about the mother she lost too soon, about the years of loneliness, about the persistent fear of getting attached and losing again. Dean listened without interrupting, without trying to fix anything, just by being present. When she finished, there were tears in his eyes. "I never told this to anyone," she confessed. "Thank you for trusting me," he replied, gently holding her hand. The love between them grew quietly, like a plant that strengthens slowly, its roots deepening in fertile soil. Dean had the patience necessary to overcome the carefully constructed barriers by Summer. She, in turn, found in him a security she had never known. They married in an intimate ceremony, with only a few close friends. Summer wore a simple cream silk dress and a single flower in her hair. Dean couldn't take his eyes off her as they exchanged handwritten vows. The promises were not grand. They spoke of companionship, respect, presence, the kind of sustainable love that would withstand the wear of time. The married life settled naturally. They rented a small house with a garden in the back, where Summer planted herbs for tea. They adopted a mutt from the local shelter, which Dean named Fitzgerald, Fitz for short. Mornings began with shared coffee at the kitchen table, usually in comfortable silence, each respecting the other's space. Nights ended with side-by-side reading in bed, occasionally interrupted to share a particularly beautiful passage. It was when Dean received the promotion offer that the first tremor hit the solid structure they had built. The company offered the position of project manager, a role he had always aimed for, with a significantly higher salary, but it required frequent, sometimes long, trips. "It's an incredible opportunity," Summer said, holding his hands over the kitchen table. "You've worked so hard for this." "But there will be many trips," he pondered, studying her expression. 3, sometimes 4 days a week away. "I don't know if I want that." "I will be here when you return," she assured with a smile that didn't completely reach her eyes. "Besides, I can focus on the translations. Time will go by quickly." Dean accepted the promotion, although a hint of uncertainty lingered. In the first few weeks, they adapted well to the new routine. He called every night. She sent photos of the small changes in the garden, of Fitz doing something funny, of the sunset seen from the window. When he returned, there was always a warm reunion, as if the time apart only intensified the love. Suddenly, Dean started to notice changes. Summer's messages became shorter, less frequent. Sometimes she wouldn't answer the calls, later explaining that she had fallen asleep early or gone out for a walk. When he returned, she still welcomed him warmly, but there was a distance in her eyes that wasn't there before. "Is everything okay?" he asked one night, while she washed the dinner dishes with mechanical movements. "Of course," she replied, without turning around. "I'm just tired. This month's translation is complex." Dean tried to make up for his absence by being more present when he was home. He prepared elaborate breakfasts, planned weekend outings, and brought back small gifts from his trips. Summer thanked him, smiled, and participated, yet there was something broken in her expression that he couldn't quite identify. The nights became quieter. Where they once slept cuddled up, there was now a respectful space between their bodies. Summer started to suffer from insomnia, often going to sleep in the guest room to not be a bother. Meals, once moments of connection, became more hurried, filled with superficial conversations about the weather and news. Dean tried to talk several times. "What's happening to us?" he gently asked. Summer always deflected, saying she was just tired, stressed with deadlines, feeling a bit lonely due to his travels, but that it would pass. He offered solutions, cutting down on trips, finding another job, doing couples therapy, but she refused them all, insisting that the problem was only temporary. On a rainy Sunday morning, while Dean was making pancakes, her favourite, Summer entered the kitchen with swollen eyes from a lack of sleep. She sat at the table with trembling hands. "We need to talk," she said with a low but firm voice. Dean felt his stomach sink. He turned off the stove and sat across from her, trying to brace himself for anything. "I want a divorce," she said bluntly, looking at her own hands. "I'm not happy. I can't go on like this." "Summer, please," he pleaded, his voice choked. "We can sort this out. Whatever it is, we can work through it together." "No, Dean," she interrupted, finally meeting his eyes. "There is nothing to sort out. It's over. You deserve someone who can make you happy, someone whole." "You make me happy," he insisted, holding her cold hands. "You always have." "I've decided," she replied, pulling her hands away. "Please, respect that." The following weeks were a blur of pain and confusion. Dean moved into a small apartment near the office. Summer stayed with the house and Fitz. Her lawyer prepared the papers, a fair division of assets without complications. She wanted nothing more than what was already hers. There would be no dispute, just a civilized end to what had once been beautiful. On the day scheduled for the signing, Dean arrived early at the lawyer's office. He had slept poorly as he had every night since the separation. He was wearing the same suit from the wedding, now a bit loose. He had lost weight. Summer arrived punctually, dressed simply, her face pale and her eyes tired. They sat facing each other, with papers between them. The lawyer explained each clause, but Dean barely listened. He watched Summer, trying to understand how they had gotten there. She kept her eyes down, responding mechanically when necessary. When it came time to sign, the lawyer discreetly left the room, leaving them alone for a few minutes. Dean held the pen, feeling its disproportionate weight. He was about to sign when he heard Summer's voice, almost a whisper. "You deserve to know the truth." He looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time that day. There was something there, fear, pain, and a sad resolution. Summer stood up slowly, her legs visibly shaking, and grabbed her purse. From inside she took out a sealed brown envelope. She handed it to Dean without saying anything more. With unsteady fingers he opened the envelope. Inside there was a medical report bearing the letterhead of a large university hospital. Summer's name was at the top. Dean began to read, his heart racing with every word. A degenerative and rapidly progressive disease. Life expectancy of 2 to 3 years. Date of diagnosis: 4 months ago, exactly when she had started to distance herself. Dean looked up, stunned. Summer was crying silently. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice almost inaudible. "I found out a week after your promotion," she replied. "You were so happy, so fulfilled. How could I destroy that? How could I make you abandon everything to take care of someone who is going to—" Her voice faltered. "Who is going to wither away slowly?" "Summer." Dean stood up, walking around the table to her. "That wasn't your right. It was our decision. I saw you dedicate years to get where you are," she explained, the tears now running freely. "I saw how your eyes sparkled when you talked about the new projects. How could you trade that for nights in hospitals, for changing diapers, for watching the person you love lose the ability to swallow, to breathe?" Dean did not respond. He just stared at the papers for a moment longer, as if each letter was burning into his eyes. His heart was beating so hard it seemed to echo in the silent room. His fingers gripped the pen, hesitated. Inside, everything was screaming. None of this made sense. None of it was fair. Then, without a word, he released the pen. He got up, crossed the space between them, and wrapped her in his arms. Summer collapsed against his chest. The choked cries, the contained fear, the suffocating guilt, all came to the surface. She didn't resist. She cried like a child who no longer knows how to pretend to be strong, and he held her as if holding his own life. The papers remained on the table, untouched. There would be no divorce. That night, there was nothing but silence and breathing. Sitting on the living room floor with their faces still wet with tears, she said, with a voice almost devoid of strength, "I tried to spare you." And he, without needing to respond, did what he had always done. He stayed. The next morning, Dean reorganized everything. He cancelled trips, postponed projects, and redesigned his life without a single regret. Not because he was giving up on his own dreams, but because the greatest one was still there, sitting in front of him, alive. Summer tried to stop him. She tried to push him back to his career, to high flights, to freedom. But there was something in his eyes that would not bend. He did not see her as a burden. He saw a whole woman, even if fragile, even if afraid, even if sick. And then there, between the exhaustion and tenderness, she gave in. Not for herself, not for the treatment, but because he deserved it from her. Because after everything, she realized that if there was someone in the world capable of fighting for her, it was him. And if he believed, then she would choose to believe with him. They began the journey together, with faith, with courage. They prayed every night, sometimes in words, sometimes just with the silence of their joined hands. They asked for strength, they asked for time, they asked for a miracle. And even on days when Summer faltered in faith, Dean remained steadfast, because his hope was not loud. It was stubborn, resilient. The doctors watched, skeptical at first. But the results began to surprise. The progression of the disease slowed, the symptoms regressed. There were days when she got up on her own, others when she laughed with ease. The cure still seemed distant, but something was changing. And Dean knew it was faith. 2 years have passed, 2 years of tears and overcoming challenges, of praying through the night and holding hands in the dark. 2 years of intensive treatments and small daily victories. 2 years during which Dean never stopped saying, "You will win." 2 years during which Summer learned to say, "I believe." Then came the definitive test. The silence in the room was different that afternoon. The doctors exchanged glances, repeated the tests, redid the reports. There were no more signs of the disease, none. It was impossible, they said. Inexplicable. 1 case in 1,000, perhaps in 1,000,000. But it was real. Summer was cured. She collapsed into his lap, sobbing as if reborn. Dean embraced her with his eyes closed, and together they knelt on the clinic floor, thanking God, faith, love. Nothing would ever be the same again. Today, Summer lives free. She runs, dances, reads, writes, and beside Dean, every moment is a celebration. On the porch at sunset, when the sun slips through the trees, she holds his hand and smiles, not with fear, but with gratitude. The divorce papers remain tucked away, folded, forgotten at the bottom of a drawer, intact, untouched, as a reminder of what was almost lost, and a testament to what was saved. Because everything changed when she chose to believe with him, because he deserved it from her, and because that love, theirs, was not written on paper. It was written in faith, and it all began the moment she said, "You deserve to know the truth." If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.